Okay, good evening. I call this February 2nd Sammamish Planning Commission meeting to order. I'll start out by saying it's Groundhog Day again. Let's start out with roll call. Mike Bresco.
I'm here.
I'm Mark Boffman. I'm here. John Bachman.
Here.
Carrie Bosworth.
I'm here.
And I will welcome our newest planning commissioner, Wasim Fayed. Wasim, you want to just take 30 seconds and introduce yourself, or less if you want?
Sure. My name is Wasim Fayed. I'm a resident in Sammamish since 2001 for 21 years plus. I also own Tanur here, and I'm a retired Microsoft employee in 2019. And I'm very happy to be part of, or very glad to be part of this commission, and I appreciate it. And nice to meet you all.
All right, Julian, let's go ahead and do the meeting accessibility statement.
The public is welcome to attend Planning Commission meetings in person at City Hall, 801 228th Avenue Southeast, or virtually through Zoom. In accordance with the latest public health guidance, masks are recommended but not required for in-person attendance. Public comments. Each speaker is allowed up to 3 minutes for non-agenda comment, 5 minutes if representing an organization, and 7 minutes for agenda public comment. For those providing comment through Zoom, once you have dialed into the meeting, please virtually raise your hand to indicate you would like to provide public comment. Your mic will remain muted until you are called on during the public comment period. To give public comment via Zoom, join the webinar via the link https://us06web.zom.us/828-226-487-94. To give public comment via mobile or landline telephone, dial the following number: US +1 253 215 8782, webinar ID 828-226-487-94#.
Thank you, Julian. Next is approval of the agenda for this evening. This evening's agenda includes a little bit of planning commission business and then a discussion and review of the draft comprehensive plan vision statement and strategies and the work plan. Any comments or changes to the agenda? Nope, no changes. So we'll call the agenda approved by common consent. Next, approval of the meeting minutes from our January 19th meeting. Anybody have any corrections to the meeting minutes? No corrections to the meeting minutes. So we'll call January 19th regular meeting minutes approved. Next is non-agenda public comment. So looks like Mary's got some non-agenda public comment, and then we'll see if we have anybody online.
Good evening. This is Mary Wichter. I've lived in Sammamish for 22 years. First of all, welcome to the new member. Thank you for having the dedication, interest, time to put yourself to helping the community and the service that you'll be providing. And I really appreciate the other planning commission who have been here a long time or shorter time and who have really great questions and comments. I cannot emphasize to you enough that the work that the Planning Commission does. I've been speaking publicly, mostly for stormwater, but other topics as well, since March 17th of 2015, which is 7 years. And after my first year, city manager Lyman Howard had called me into his room and he said, "Hey, Mary, I like what you're doing, but I brought you in here for personal reasons." So I talked with him about maps. And he said, "I'd really like you to start going to the Planning Commission meetings," because he said, if you go to city council, we can make changes. But he said the earlier that you get it into the system, the better. So he said, if you could start attending those, it would really help. So I started attending those in addition to the city council meetings long ago. And I did find out that there's a lot of work that the Planning Commission does. It's the first time the real official package is presented. The staff and the consultants do a really terrific job for the city. And I've been very pleased with them through all these years, and particularly with all the people that we have that work for the city at this point and the consultants that have been chosen. And the amount of work that you do is very important. But I also tell you that if we don't have code or regulations, it's really hard to get anything fixed. And if there's code or regulations and there's no compliance, then you can't follow up on it and get anything changed. So right now, for 2023 and 2024, I believe you're going to do probably the biggest work that's been done since about 2013 or 2015. So for the last 10 years, because the comprehensive plan is a guiding light. It needs to be in there. So the vision statement needs to say kind of where we are and where we're kind of aspiring to. And then the comprehensive plan needs to have all the goals and policies that help implement that. And we really want to have all the feedback that we can up early. The other thing I'll tell you is I only get 3 minutes at this mic. Sometimes I prepare for days, weeks, months, sometimes it's years of data, and I only get 3 minutes to spit it out. So I talk pretty rapidly. They took away our ability to show anything. So I'll turn into Bill Nye the Science Guy for a couple things. But what's really important, whether it's me or anybody, and whether it's being delivered in a calm voice or a hopeful voice or a mad voice, it's really important that you listen, because sometimes there's one word that really makes the sense. Everybody's got a point, and if they've come all the way here, they really mean it. So it shouldn't be written off as, oh, maybe that didn't happen, or maybe that was a long time ago, or maybe it doesn't matter. Everything matters. And the thing that really helps it move forward is when you, as planning commissioners, if you take that information, you say, hey, this was really important today. We need to put it in the packet, or we need to do it. And then that way I have more of a chance of getting in the matrix and having staff updated. So thank you for the work that you do. And I look forward to the next 2 years.
Thanks, Mary. Julian, do we have anybody?
And we have one hand raised, Mr. Stickney. I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Good evening, planning commissioners. Paul Stickney, Sammamish. Nice to see 2 new members appointed. Hope to get a chance to meet you sometime. I'll stop in at a meeting now and then. I'm another longtime, planning commissioner involvement and city council involvement, as is Mary Wichter. My theme is to optimize housing supplies for life, if you just want to summarize it. A couple non-agenda topics. The council retreat, watch that. It's about a 6.5 hour video. It is online. I found particularly interesting a couple of the exercises that the retreat facilitator did, handing out random pennies to city council members and asking them what happened for the year they got. And there was another exercise just after the first lunch break that was asking city council members for what their sort of phrase or word was as to why they got involved with the city. That was interesting. They went through at the retreat the objectives and actions of the council in the morning, things that were on council's aims, and in the afternoon they went through the work plan. And the last hour was spent on city council rules and going to be re-looking at all the rules and also preparing a code of conduct and a code of ethics. It was quite an interesting hour conversation. Another interesting thing that happened this last week was Wednesday, a week ago, so I guess that'd be about 8 days ago, the Growth Management Planning Council of King County met, and they had 2 interesting things on their agenda. They had a 4-to-1 program, which is a pretty heavy lift concept. And the short story is, over the last 30 years, the county has preserved far more open space and land through TDRs. It was a pretty amazing number. Their TDR program preserved about 146,000 acres, where the 4-to-1 program got around 3,700. They're also talking about the Housing Affordability Committee of King County. That's a whole topic of itself. They're asking the Regional Growth Management Planning Council to approve that in either March or in May. So those are just a couple updates of things happening. Again, nice to meet you and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Paul. Julian, anybody else?
And we have no more hands raised.
All right. Thanks. Next, let's move on to our most fun new business item of the year each year. Each year we re-elect or elect chair and vice chair of the planning commission. So this is how we've done it in recent past anyway. We start out with chair and I take nominations. And if there's one nominate, well, each time someone gets nominated, then I give that person the opportunity to speak. Sometimes people decline, sometimes people say sure thing. Anyway, I give everybody the opportunity to speak. And then if there's more than one nomination, we'll vote based on the order of nominations. If there's only one, then we'll just vote for formality. Then we'll move on to vice chair and do the exact same thing. It can be quick, but as one previous planning commissioner said, it can sometimes also be awkward. So we'll try to make it as painless as possible. So, and start out with chair, nominations for chair.
I nominate Mark Baumann.
I second.
You guys are not making this easy. I don't know if we really need, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll second. Anyone else? I guess I'm willing to do it for one more year. All right, so let's just take a vote on that. All those in favor of Mark Boffman being chair for this year? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Tempting to vote against myself. Okay, let's do vice chair. How about I nominate Mike Bresco?
I'll second.
Okay, anybody else? All right, let's vote on Mike Bresco for vice chair. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Mike. Now I feel like I can take a lot of vacations this year. All right, that's out of the way. Let's move on to our main topic for this evening. Kelly or Evan, do you want to introduce Jeff or should we just jump right to Jeff to start in?
I'll go ahead and introduce him, and I'm actually going to run through a couple slides
Okay.
as well, just to give us some context setting and background on each of the subjects. So welcome and thank you, Planning Commission. My name is Evan Fisher, Senior Management Analyst with DCD and the city's comprehensive plan update project manager. And tonight, as Chair Boffman pointed out, we are joined by Jeff Arango from Framework, our lead consultant on the comp plan update. And we will be going through the vision statement and strategies along with the draft scope of work, or the scope of work for the comprehensive plan update. So as a little context setting and background, I just wanted to run through where we've been and where we're going with each of the items. So starting with the vision, as you may be aware, the city began updating its community vision statement back in 2021 with the Community Visioning Project. This work included pretty extensive community engagement and outreach, including a statistically valid survey, and resulted in a draft vision statement that was reviewed by the Planning Commission and City Council. At the time, the council did not move forward with approving that draft vision statement and instead directed that it be picked up as part of the comprehensive plan update. In the summer of 22, Framework presented a project approach for completing the draft vision statement, which included another touch point with the community, which took place during the planning summit in November. The key ideas and themes that we heard from the planning summit, along with the community engagement that took place during the visioning project, were then incorporated into materials which were presented to the Planning Commission and City Council for workshops in December. Sorry, I'm forgetting to breathe when I talk. It's been a minute. The feedback heard from the Planning Commission and City Council during those work sessions has then been incorporated into the drafts you'll see tonight, which will be reviewed by the City Council on February 14th. And any feedback from them will be incorporated into a final draft, which will be approved by resolution in March. Next slide, please. The scope of work for the comp plan update, really the takeaway here is there are two key buckets of work in the comp plan update. There are the mandatory items and the discretionary items. The mandatory items are those that the state is requiring of us to complete for certification of our comp plan, and the discretionary items are the optional items the city is choosing to add to the comp plan. And so going back to March of 2022, when we were first bringing a consultant on as part of the comp plan update, we had a draft scope of work that captured at a high level what the city thought the mandatory work items would be at that time. Since then, we have expanded that list and refined it as we have come to better understand what is required of the city. And we've done this through guidance from the state, along with completing the Department of Commerce and PSRC checklists. And then one key thing to note is that the mandatory or the discretionary items are those directed by the city council. And in July of 22, the city council directed staff to include 2 new optional elements to the comprehensive plan, creating a climate change and resiliency element and an economic development element. So tonight we'll be presenting a scope of work that captures both the mandatory and discretionary items and kind of sets us on a formal direction for resolution, approval of a resolution by city council on that March 21st date. Next slide. To help guide tonight's conversation, we came up with some questions for the commission. So first is, what feedback do you have about the vision statement and strategies format? And do you find the format to be accessible and helpful? Do you have any amendments or edits to the language found in the vision statement or strategies? And also, what questions do you have about the scope of work and the process moving forward? And with that, I'll go ahead and let Jeff take it away and present the vision.
Okay, great. Thank you, Evan. Great summary. Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Arango with Framework. And before we get in the vision, I'll just provide a little bit of more detail on the scope of work that was included in the packet. So as Evan said, we started in the spring of last year with an initial scope of work and contract, and actually worked with the city kind of in the late summer and into the fall on expanding that scope to address not only the requirements, but some of the optional elements, and as a way to feed into the budget process. And these are some of the areas where we provided additional resources. So project management and coordination, this has been extensive for the project, including coordinating with staff, but also coordinating with the team that's working on the climate action plan and the transportation element and the parks element. So that is a significant effort, and we do have some data now in terms of the resources needed for that. We have some additional resources for public engagement, including pop-up events and focus groups going forward. Land use scenarios, which we've just started, we did expand some of the scope for that as well. And it seems like weekly we're getting new information and guidance from the state and regional entities, but we plan to come back to the Planning Commission in the spring with an initial take on some of the land use scenarios. The economic development element has been incorporated into the scope. We expanded some of the resources for the land use element as well for some of the reasons I just described. Climate change element and the climate action plan, partially grant funded, but we've incorporated that scope into our contract as well. One of the optional elements that came out of the meetings last year with the Planning Commission and City Council was desire to do a web-based plan. So we've included that in the scope. We also, in the initial contract last year, had some resources to do a code policy review, but the guidance from the state is that we need to basically adopt all of the development code updates to implement the comprehensive plan at the same time that the comprehensive plan is adopted. So we have added in resources for that, and we have Code Studio on our team to assist, and they were our partner in Development Regulations Phase 2. And then finally, resources for SEPA support, which were not in the initial scope of work, but is in the expanded scope of work. And that will be basically to do environmental review on the draft comp plan once we get to that point. So happy to take questions on that towards the end of the meeting, and Chair Bachman submitted some comments I'm happy to address later as well. Feel free also to send written comments to us on the vision, and we'll continue to sift through those and respond accordingly. So appreciate those that have already submitted comments to us. So before I get to the draft vision, just a couple of slides that we used earlier in the process, just to kind of provide some context to how we got here. So this is just a refresher. So what is a vision? Communicates the community values and identity. It reflects the community input. As Evan said, we spent a lot of time reviewing the community visioning project data and input. We had the planning summit with one of the events focused on visioning. We've met with the planning commission, the council. So we've taken the draft vision statements that were submitted from the planning commission and tried to put all that together into the draft that we've come up with. Should be aspirational, but grounded in the plan realities. It is a vision for the comp plan, so it should have some connection to the actions of the plan. Should include tangible elements that give it meaning and sort of give a sense of the direction and priorities of the plan. Often communicated with text, but can be communicated with graphics, maps, videos, and other types of media. We do have some graphic elements in the draft vision statement as it is currently. And just, from our experience, developing a vision statement is both an art and a science. And I think what we're presenting tonight is a starting point that can be refined, as Evan said, leading up to the resolution in March. So we're not finished with this effort, and certainly opportunity for more input. Quick reminder, community visioning priorities came out of the statistically valid survey: improved infrastructure, environmental preservation, improved transportation, parks, recreation, and open space. We also, of course, have been considering the city council priorities as well in crafting the vision statement in our discussions with them. So just briefly, this is the existing vision statement. I'm not going to read it, but it's a simple text statement. And this is what's in the existing comprehensive plan. So there are definitely some themes in this that are carried forward into the updated vision statement. And then, as Evan said, the Community Vision Project came out with a draft vision statement. And again, the decision was to kind of fold this into the comprehensive plan process. But certainly these both informed some of our work on the vision statement. Again, a little bit more broadly, some of the broader themes that came out of the Community Visioning Project. And again, we spent some time, I think, at one of our previous meetings talking about some of these and how maybe some of the themes or words are maybe misaligned in terms of how they're presented. But that aside, I think it does highlight some key things that are important to the community. So housing choice, variety, and affordability, something that wasn't in the previous slide. More transportation options, cultural events, services, retail amenities, connection to the natural environment, always a strong theme in Sammamish. Being safe, inclusive, diverse. So that just, again, provides a little bit more of a foundation on some of the influences for the draft vision statement. So we have a couple of elements here that we're going to present tonight. So first thing I'd like to mention is that this vision statement does build off of the existing vision statement in terms of the themes of planet, people, and prosperity, which I think are still, highly relevant. And so the vision actual statement is quite short and concise. And this really forms the foundation for the vision framework, which includes the strategies, which I'll present in a moment. We have 10 strategies around these three themes, and I'll just quickly read the vision statement. In 2044, Sammamish is a regional leader on planning for a livable and vibrant community in harmony with nature. From its beautiful nature and dynamic park system to its attractive mixed-use centers and connected neighborhoods to its thriving local businesses and active cultural scene, Sammamish is a beloved community and place to live, work, and visit. So, there'll be certainly some fine tuning of the language, and we've already gotten some comments in that regard. But again, the intent was to have something that's fairly short, inspirational, and can feed into a more specific set of strategies that really start to give meaning and action to the plan. So the 10 strategies are coordinated around these kind of three buckets. First is livable, natural, and built environment. So again, tying into the very large effort or substantial effort to develop a climate action plan is to sustain the natural environment and reduce climate impacts. And the climate action plan will have, a lot of specifics about how we do that. And look forward to seeing that presented to the commission, to the council in the future. Enhanced transit access and multimodal transportation systems. So the community gave us a lot of input during the planning summit about the need for better neighborhood connections, more transportation options, opportunities to reduce vehicle use. So that reflects that. Develop a world-class parks and recreation system. I think something Sammamish is well on their way to doing already, but speaks to the effort of the parks or the PROS plan update. Ensure safe, attractive, connected, and safe neighborhoods. Again, I think a theme that's already embodied in the existing plan and the existing vision statement. Providing housing choice and supporting a wide array of lifestyles. And we have, some very specific mandates in terms of providing certain types of housing with this comprehensive plan, which we'll be working through with the commission going forward. Increasing diverse job opportunities and access to work in Sammamish. So Sammamish, as you know, is a highly residential community. Is there a way to kind of provide more local job opportunities and opportunities for people that work in Sammamish to also live in Sammamish? Enhancing equity and inclusion through communication and engagement with the community. So we're doing lots of community engagement for the comprehensive plan and for other projects, but hopefully that can help to continue to build a foundation going forward, where the city continues to maintain a robust communication strategy with the broader community. The third bucket addresses economic development. So build a thriving town center and mixed use districts. Town center plan, happened many years ago and is still kind of evolving, but we want to continue to emphasize its importance in terms of planning and community. Support local business and entrepreneurship, something we'll be exploring as part of the economic development element. And then the last one, which is related to the first two, is establish fiscal sustainability for the city. So provide more of a mix of funding sources for the community, again, giving the high proportion of residential development to commercial in the city currently. And I won't read through each of these, but the idea is that each of the strategies then has these short statements that provide kind of more detail on how those strategies would be actualized. So again, first looking at natural environment and reducing climate impacts, it does provide, again, more specifics. And this could feed into some metrics that could be developed as part of the comp plan that could be tracked, perhaps annually and communicated back to the community. We also see the vision statement and the strategies maybe being, very visible. It's something that might be posted in city council chambers and just something that, again, can be tracked and communicated, which is always a challenge with a comprehensive plan because it addresses so many different topics and elements for the city. So there you have those. And then each of them, again, continue with more specifics. What does it mean to provide a variety of housing choices and affordability? What does it mean to increase diverse job opportunities? And again, there's additional layers that we could start to build into this once we get into the goals and policies for the comp plan. And then lastly, the 3 strategies on economic development. And then in terms of graphic presentation, we did this matrix, which shows how each of these strategies would be actualized through the different comprehensive plan elements. And our plan going forward is to bring each of the elements forward to the Planning Commission to present to the commission a summary of existing conditions for each of the elements. So other comprehensive plan projects I've been a part of, we've done like a big existing conditions report that's, 100 or a couple hundred pages. And so we felt rather than trying to present that all at once, we would break it up into the individual elements. And so we have a schedule going forward with the commission through this year. We'll bring an element forward. We'll bring a report on existing conditions. And some of these topics already have quite a bit of information like housing because, you're in the midst of developing the housing action plan. And the housing needs analysis that was done as part of that is certainly a relevant piece of information for the comp plan. So we'll bring those forward. We'll do a review of goals and policies against the vision and strategies once it's finalized. And then we'll actually do the drafting of the updated elements in the first half of 2024. So again, the matrix shows with these sort of graduated dot symbols where each of these strategies is embedded or addressed in each of the elements and the magnitude to which that element addresses that strategy. So the bigger the circle, the more prominent that strategy will be featured in each of the elements. And there might be some fine tuning here that we need to do. But again, this is our kind of initial take. And you'll see over on the right, we have the two new elements. So climate change and economic development. Those are elements that are not in the existing comp plan. And that is the conclusion of the presentation. I can pull the the screen share back up. I think it may have stopped, and we can refer back to any of the slides and be happy to answer questions and take feedback. So thank you.
And just to clarify, are we going to touch on scope of work after we just have a discussion about this, or should our comments and questions now include scope of work type stuff?
I think you could blend them together, but I'll defer to you.
Okay.
And Chair Bachman, if you want me to address your written comments, I'm also happy to do that as well, as I did read them in advance.
There's really only a couple in there that I think we should probably air out. The rest of them are wordsmithing and really minor stuff. So I'll
Okay.
hold those till everybody else has had a chance. All right. So who wants to go first with questions or comments? And Carrie, you'll have to just jump in because when we're screen sharing, I don't necessarily see you. Anybody? Yikes. Oh, John, go ahead.
Okay, I'll break the ice. Evan, I wanted to thank you for sending along those questions. I think that helped frame our conversation. So my response to the first question about the format, I think it's simple and easy to understand. It's not too many words, and I like the layout. Amendments or edits to the language. As I said, the last time we looked at the planning vision statement, I thought that the vision statement was too long, and I still think it's too long and wordy. I'd like to see just a couple of sentences, because all of the elements really tie back, something that the city continues to be and plans to be livable, vibrant, sustainable community, harmony with nature, and then go on maybe with a sentence or two about economic development, diversity, equity, housing affordability, and accessibility, some of the key pieces we're looking at. Going on, the only other place I had a major comment in the proposed vision strategies was in the livable, natural and built environment, number 3, parks. I would suggest adding open space to the park statement and titles, and then using that open space to tie more firmly to the environmental conservation and climate change pieces, because that's a big piece of what Parks does now. I assume our Parks Department manages our open space. So I think some changes could be made in the matrix as well. Just an editorial comment here. Aspirational statements are a really good thing. I question the use of world-class. Showed up a couple times. Feels like it's a little over the top to me. Of course, we're shooting for high quality and all of those good things. Nothing on scope of work. The checklist and analysis at the end, again, staff's work on that was excellent in the sense that it's really illuminating to me the amount of work that we're going to have to go through as we get into the weeds on this. So I think that concludes my comments.
Wasim, go ahead.
Thank you. So first of all, I did read through these slides over the weekend, and I appreciate that I was given this ahead of time. And the format and the content in it was very, very educational for me, and seeing how much effort and how much work the city staff has done in getting these the vision statement and the work that they've done to get to this point. This is truly appreciated. The only question I have is, it mentioned in 2044. Why 2044? What was the the reason for picking that specific date, and what does it mean in this context? That's the only
Yeah.
question that I have.
Yeah, great question. So the plan will be adopted at the end of 2024, and the plan horizon is 20 years. So we're essentially looking at the end of the planning cycle, the end of the 20-year planning cycle.
Understood.
Yep.
So
And
understood.
that
So
comes from the state requirement that your plan has to be valid for a minimum of 20 years.
understood. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Carrie, do you have questions or comments?
I do. Thank you. One second. First, I apologize. I'm not there in person to meet our new commissioner, Fayed. Welcome. And also wanted to thank you for the great packet. I definitely see our feedback from our last meeting in this, and that is truly appreciated. Things that we discussed and talked through, I see that in this body of work. I like that the statement has become more aspirational again, but do agree it could be slightly shortened. As far as sort of the overall format, I love this one pager here. I see how it brings in some of the elements that are used from the other cities. And I particularly like the gray bubbles on the side, bringing it back specifically to the comp plan, like rather directly. So that's great. One of our residents, Mary, sent in a detailed review of the graphics, and I appreciate that she took the time to look at those because I was looking at the words. And so I would definitely ask that if that hasn't already been shared with Jeff, that would be great. Mary looks at a lot of different things across different cities, and I think that will be helpful feedback. Let's see. In terms of language and amendments, the one thing that jumped out to me was number 6 about diversifying job opportunities. I don't have anything against that. I just saw, it's the first time I feel like I've seen that really highlighted that way. I obviously understand and want to promote more businesses from the economic development perspective. And I could definitely see how, particularly like in the area of teens, that increasing job opportunities is great. So I'm not against it being there. It was interesting to see it highlighted so specifically there. And let's see, I do like the numbered list. I like those additional words that go with each of the numbered lists. And I appreciate how specific they are to Sammamish, mentioning, tree canopy, King County Metro. I'm always wanting things to be, bring it back specific to who we are. So I appreciate that. And then the last thing I will say is in terms of moving forward, the community was very involved in the initial draft. And so I'm sure we will bring this forward in this version or a tweaked version back to the community and would be interested in hearing their feedback. So thank you.
Great. Appreciate those comments.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I have a few comments. And actually, many of the ones that I had noted were already stated, so I won't restate those. On the format, as I looked at the packet, I saw 3 formats. So one was relatively short, 1 page. and then the one that's on screen now, which kind of summarizes everything. And it struck me that they can have different reasons, right? So the one pager might be something that's more generally communicated. And the one that had been on the screen, the one that includes the kind of the matrix with the bubbles, that's very helpful for us. And for planning, it's like, okay, are we connecting with the comp plan, elements of the comp plan? So I don't know if that was the intent, but I felt like that first one, the one pager, was good for sort of general, and then the one that's on the screen now that include the elements of the comp plan were super helpful for us. Diving a little bit deeper, the one that was sent that's in our packet that includes this crosswalk, it actually had, and I think the one pager also had a little bit of statement, like 2 paragraphs that described Sammamish 2044 planning vision, builds on community needs, carrying forward planet and parenthetically environmental quality, people, parenthetically social justice, and prosperity, parenthetically economic vitality. Those particular phrases, so for example, social justice, does not show up on the illustration that's shown on the screen right now. It says equitable social environment. So those are not consistent. There should be some consistency there. And so there's some fine tuning, and I'd be happy to send an email with a couple of others that are similar to that. I do have a question about some of the wording in the vision framework itself. And it talks about regional leader on planning for blah, blah, blah. And I guess I felt like a vision statement shouldn't say that we're really good at planning to have these things, but we actually have them. So I don't know if I'm mistaken in that, but my recommendation would be that this should be aspirational in terms of what we are, not what we're planning to be. And I have a couple more. Let's see. And this will be a little bit random, but the strategy 7 about the enhance equity and inclusion through communication and engagement, that seems kind of soft to me. Just communicating, will that have a desired effect? So I'd like to see if there's some ways that might be strengthened in terms of what we're doing beyond communicating. On the illustration, it says viable economic development. I actually looked up viable. That you'd be surprised what planning commissioners do sometimes. It's like, but I felt like that was not a very powerful word. And it says it's feasible. We would have a feasible economic environment for success, as opposed to something like economic vitality, which in fact were words that were used earlier in the statements that were, not shown on this illustration. So maybe go back to economic vitality. And I do wonder if for equitable social environment, instead of environment, we might want to talk about community or strong social bonds or something like that. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And this also plays with the earlier statement in the written paragraph about social justice. That could be a lightning rod phrase. And it can mean a lot of different things. I was actually in one group where, people are going through the elements of social justice, and included, retribution kind of things. So payback for past errors and, community development. So I don't think that's what we want to do, but we want to be welcoming. So some way of like indicating that we're a real welcoming community. We respect and want to, foster diversity and so forth, I think would be perhaps something that would stand the time. This should stand for 20 years, right? And then the last one, and this is down in the details, but it's easier to state this rather than put it in an email kind of thing. When I was looking at the bubble. So the relative importance and the increased diverse job opportunities. So, strong correlation with land use, for example. It's like, I'm a little surprised about that. And in fact, interesting comparing that to sustained natural environment, which doesn't have as big an impact on land use. So there's a few inconsistencies, I think, in the relative impacts that are shown. Not major, and it's not like that needs a whole rewrite or anything, but as we communicate more broadly, I think, just kind of go and do a vertical and horizontal sanity check that, it's not like, the diverse job opportunities really has a big impact on a number of these things when, some others might have as equally or maybe even a bigger impact. And I have one question about that. The increased diverse job opportunities versus the establish or support local businesses. So I'm wondering what might, whether it's code or, what sort of things that might be built into the actual activities or actions that Sammamish takes that could increase the job opportunities, the more diverse job opportunities. And I'm wondering, Jeff, if you or somebody else might be able to share that.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for those very thoughtful comments. Really appreciate that. So increased diverse job opportunities. I think one of the reasons why land use is highlighted with the bigger circle is that we would potentially be looking at changes to perhaps the development code in areas like the mixed use centers and in the town center that would be the primary areas to increase diverse job opportunities within the city. And access to work in Sammamish. There could also be an element of, supporting remote work, whether through better broadband or, integrating services into residential neighborhoods or things like that. So it is, I think, in some respects, a land use issue, because the existing commercial areas tend to be largely service-based, and certainly we want to, retain that because of their importance in the community. But there could be other opportunities through redevelopment to expand job opportunities in the community. And so, hopefully that answered your question. But if not, I'm happy to follow up.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks. And then as a quick closing comment, unless Evan or somebody was, I thought somebody else was going to come. Although there may be some fine tuning and a little bit of wordsmithing and so forth. Overall, I think that the list of strategies are pretty strong. And, if we're able to implement those, it will make it better Sammamish. And I'm particularly pleased about the balance between, sort of the natural environment to what we're doing with community and including the economic development as well. I think that's a really powerful way to present this.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that. And if I could just make one quick comment on one of the other questions you raised was the opening statement where it talks about being a regional leader. So first off, regional leadership was something that the council had identified as a theme. So that's where that came from. And the thinking was that in 2044, so in 20 years, because of the adoption and implementation of the comp plan, we would present ourselves as a regional leader because we have achieved, ideally the strategies and the vision that we had put forth. There may be a better way to communicate that, but just wanted to provide a little bit of context. Thank you.
All right, I'll take a turn here. A couple different things, and Jeff, most all of this was in my written comments, so you can read those and catch most of it. The first one, however, is something I just noticed, which is a small thing, but in the number one, it says 25% at the end. Please make sure that we somewhere say what that means, like 25% over 2021 or 25% compared to something, because those are the kinds of things we always measure ourselves against in the future. And if we don't say what we're measuring against, then, and maybe it's not right here, right? Maybe it's someplace else, but let's just make sure that when we describe those measurable things, that we make it a useful tool, not just a statement.
Agreed.
Yeah. Under number 2, I guess I'm curious, and of course, if you've read my comments, you'll get this, but, oh, I'm sorry. That's my number 2. I apologize. 5. Um, Provide a variety of housing choices. Yeah, everybody is going to nod their head and go, yep, absolutely. Kind of know what that means. And support a wide array of lifestyles. I'm not sure what that means. And by the way, should it say provide a variety of housing choices for a wide array of lifestyles, or what are we trying to say with those words? My first
Yeah.
opinion on it is I don't really know necessarily that adds to the strategy, but maybe it means something that will then get further developed as more, detailed work on the comp plan happens. But I guess most people would understand the first part, and I think a lot of people
Yeah.
would scratch their head at the second part.
Yeah, good question. I think there's probably a better way to articulate that so it's more clear. I think the intention was sort of the issue. Well, it's not entirely this, but some of it has to do with like multi-generational housing needs. So, maybe one lifestyle is living in a, more of a semi-rural single-family neighborhood that's very sort of quiet and fits whatever lifestyle you're in need of at that time. But maybe later on you want to live in a townhouse in the town center where you can walk places and access transit more. So it's sort of, again, providing different types of housing in different locations in terms of proximity to things like commercial areas and services and things like that. So that was the intention, and agree with you that to a lot of people that would likely not be clear.
Yeah, so think about that one. Strategy 7. This may be a slightly controversial comment, but the rest of the strategies here to me feel like they are strategies for what we're going to do in the next 20 years. The way that strategy 7 is written feels like it's describing what we're going to do with updating the comp plan in the next 18 months. It feels out of place to me because of the way it's described. If the intent is that we are going to enhance equity and inclusion through communication and engagement with the community by, doing something over the next 20 years, we should say that, but that's not really what it says. The details just go into how we're going to keep people involved in the comp plan update, which is not a bad thing. It's a good tactic, but it doesn't quite fit with the rest when I read it. It seems very out of place.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think we need to modify the language below it. I think we could have something in there that maybe talks about the comprehensive plan setting the stage for it, but actually the intent was to basically use the comp plan and other planning projects. And I think the city's largely does a good job at this already, but just noting that sort of and this was a topic that the city council gave us a lot of input on when we met with them, but it's more programmatic over the long term than specific to the comp plan. So I agree that the text and the way it's written is out of place with the other one. So we'll revisit that.
And in a slightly similar vein, I think number 10, I understand what the objective of this is. I understand very well what the objective of this is. I would like to see it, and I'm not sure how, so I'm pointing out something and not really offering a solution, but I'd like to see it build a little bit stronger in terms of what is it we're going to do. And, it kind of just says the fiscal health of the city is dependent on tax revenues. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's nothing, I don't know how else to say it, nothing new, right? That's just a statement of fact that everybody would say, yeah, that's true. And from there on, it doesn't really provide much of, so what are we going to do? Are we going to, do something to actually diversify tax revenues through implementing different fiscal strategies? Are we going to, what is it we're going to do, or even suggest or hint at something we're going to do? And I don't really quite see that in the text there. So I'd suggest at least thinking about how to maybe make that a little bit more action oriented, like a lot of the rest of them are.
Yeah, that's fair. I appreciate that. I think, some of the intent was really connecting to 8 and 9 to some degree, which would help to diversify revenues, which I think is something that we should include in the statement. And largely, again, in support of a more intentional effort on economic development to, again, not rely solely on the residential taxpayers for revenue. So
Yeah.
appreciate that comment.
And I would just say, this is an important place to be sure that everything we put in here is high value. So if, for example, 8 and 9 cover it, then this should be folded into 8 and 9. But if it's something different that is related to those under this category, great, then let's describe it that way. You could
Great, will
wordsmith
do.
this stuff for 2 months and it wouldn't really change things too much, but their words do kind of matter, and communicating to ourselves in the future is important too.
Yeah, appreciate that. And we'll sift through all the written comments, including yours and any of the others that come in, and we'll come back with a summary of all the comments that we received tonight and responses to those. So we'll make sure that we track and make adjustments. And we could likely come back with the next version with track changes, so you'd be able to easily see what changed and in response to your comments. So appreciate that.
I would like to go through my scope of work comments a bit, since
Sure.
it feels
Yeah.
like we have a reasonable time frame here to do that. And I
Okay.
don't know that this may be follow-up stuff, and that's totally fine. I liked all of those had like a month and year included in the various work tasks. I think that's really helpful. The one thing is, I think at some point we should sort of talk about status and say, yeah, we're on track with this, or we're not.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be a deep dive. It's just like, yep, if you looked at this and looked at the timeframes, we are on track with everything in here except for this one. Okay, everybody feels good about that. But describing a whole long list of tasks and then never really talking about whether we're on track with them or not is kind of.
Yeah. So I can answer that. I should also first start out by saying that all of those dates were just updated before we sent it to you. So therefore we are on track, but we have modified the schedule again, because of some of the unpredictability and some of the changes to the scope that came out of last year. So we are essentially on track, and we have a very detailed schedule going forward that I anticipate we will continue to stay on track. So yeah, we are on track. And as I said, we're going to be bringing each of the elements forward. I don't know if the city staff has provided a schedule to the commission of that, but I'm sure we could do that. And again, land use is really the foundational element, so that'll be kind of first up in the spring. And then I think housing will soon follow after that, because it's a highly related topic and also one of the most important element updates that we're going to be working on. So we are on track, and to the extent that the schedule changes, we'll make sure to communicate that back to the commission.
Great. Another one, and I will say, we may have talked about some of this in the past, so if that results in me asking a dumb question, I apologize. But the scope item 2.2, existing conditions analysis, I feel like we've touched on this, but what is that task actually? What conditions is that? Is that the review of the housing stock, or is there something else that's included in existing conditions analysis?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. It looks like David has his hand up. So David, did you want to say something first?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to being on track. So yeah, we are on track. Appreciate all the work that Jeff and his team are doing here and that all the staff are doing to keep it on track. I just wanted to remind everyone who's listening that we are at the whims of the state and the county, and that there are some pretty big changes happening at the state level and county constantly. And those usually cause for some pretty significant repercussions in the work that we're doing every time we are given a new parameter, a new limit, a new bookend, a new task from the state or the county, and they keep coming. We don't anticipate they'll slow down. It's a good thing in many ways, but also it makes our work very challenging. So if we seem to be on track now, well, we might be slowed down by something later that is outside of our ability to control. So just keep that in mind. This is a moving target that we're dealing with here, as much as we're trying to contain it. Another thing that I heard was that wanting to understand how all these different pieces fit together, the different elements that we would work on. So as part of the council retreat on Saturday, if you have a chance, I know it was mentioned by one of the commenters this evening to watch that. It's a 7-hour clip. Great watch though. I'd really recommend it as well. One of the things that came out of that was the need for our communication staff and all of our different departments and project managers to pull together one location where you can go and see all the projects the city's working on and how they interrelate and sort of where they converge and align into the comprehensive plan. Because most of the efforts that we have underway, whether it's the housing action plan, the climate action plan, the PROS plan, the some of the transportation planning efforts, some of the other projects you're hearing about, our transfer development rights project, our economic development efforts. Those are all separate efforts at this point. It's kind of like all the trains leaving the station on different tracks will ultimately, join up on one track at some point and be pulled together into the comprehensive plan. And that's one of the things that Jeff's team is keeping an eye on. They're watching all the other work that's going on, and they're being looped into all those conversations so they understand how those elements will ultimately be brought into the comprehensive plan and brought to you all for discussion when that timing is right. So we're hopefully going to have a graphic here pretty soon, or a web page you could go to where you could kind of see all the things that are going on and understand time in terms of the temporal, the timeline, how they all fit together. Won't always be 100% accurate because there's a lot of things changing, but we're going to try really hard to help people understand how all these pieces fit together. So thank you for that opportunity to explain that. I'll be quiet now.
Thanks, David.
Anybody would take any bets on that? Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, appreciate that. Thanks, David. So back to the question about existing conditions. Basically, existing conditions is to basically look at trends for each of the elements in terms of what's happened since the last major comprehensive plan update, and sort of informs development of the plan. So it's a standard part of any major comprehensive plan update, and every element will have an existing conditions piece to it. So for example, for land use, you might look at past development trends. You will definitely look at the capacity for new development, which feeds into the growth targets and those requirements. So that's something we're working on right now. And when we come back to the commission in the spring, we'll provide a draft of that for your review. The housing element, a lot of the existing conditions for the housing element was addressed in the housing needs analysis, but there are some additional requirements beyond that that are required for the comp plan update that framework will be working on. The capital facilities element, for example, will have an inventory of all the capital facilities in the community, and some of which, likely have been developed since the last comp plan was updated. So it's really sort of sets the baseline for the update. And again, rather than produce one giant report and present it to the commission, we're going to be doing it element by element, starting basically now and finishing that in the summer or early fall.
Great. And I guess I would say that I think that what we're seeing here, given the breadth of what we've got to work our way through, is actually a great way of presenting it, at least I think from my standpoint, and it's hard to judge sometimes because it's hard to tell what community members who are not in the midst of all of this might perceive or understand. But for us as a planning commission, I appreciate the way that you've boiled it down and made it tangible for us. I really think that that's great. Kudos to you and your team for doing that. And I think we do need to pay attention to how the broader community latches onto some of this stuff, because it's easy for those of us who are doing it all the time, or somewhat all the time, probably more so for staff and a little bit less so for us to grasp what this is. But the real audience has to be the community. And so we got to make sure they can get what the intent is out of this as well. But thank you. I think it's great work.
Appreciate it.
I'm going to do a check here on another round of if anybody else has more comments or questions.
I have one suggestion
Go ahead, Carrie.
regarding your wide variety of lifestyles. We have a caller, Mr. Stickney, who often refers to it as cycle of life. So that might be an option that resonates with the community.
Okay, great. We'll add that to the list of suggestions.
It looks like that's all the, oh, go ahead, Wasim.
Yeah, I have one question. Maybe it's a dumb question, but I want to ask it. I'm new to all this. So looking at all this plan, there's a lot of great work here, but is there a limit of how the city is going to grow? Is there any limiting factor in terms of water supplies, in terms of power, in terms of land? Is this part of our plan to make sure that we don't exceed, keep the environment the way, we all envision it, but at the same time, ensure that the growth is controllable? Is there anything that needs to go in this vision with that regards?
Well, yes, definitely. I mean, that is definitely one of the express purposes of the comp plan, is to make sure that growth is managed and becomes an asset for the community and doesn't create, negative impacts. But with that said, I think one of the themes, and David just kind of touched on this, for the comp plan updates in this cycle are sort of the new housing targets and housing mandates from the state. So there are, I would say, more requirements than in past years. There's always an allocation of growth targets, but for this cycle, there's a lot more requirements related to affordable housing that need to be met. And so there are more things that we're going to have to work through. And with that, we still have to be able to plan for that growth in terms of infrastructure, try to do it in a way that preserves the natural environment, minimizes impacts to the climate and things like that. But we do have to balance that with complying with the growth targets and mandates. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and it's going to be quite an effort to kind of work through it in this cycle. But I'm confident we can come out hopefully with a good solution.
Thank you.
Yeah. Question.
Anybody else? Okay. Thanks, Jeff. That's all that we've got for questions and comments.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks so much. Again, really appreciate all the thoughtful comments. You're going to vastly improve the vision statement with your efforts, and we look forward to bringing it back with the changes that you all suggested. So appreciate it.
Thanks. Evan, Kelly, anything else before we move on to public comment? Okay.
Nope.
Let's go ahead and do agenda-related public comment for this evening. So this is 7 minutes per person on our topics for this evening. I'm sure there'll be all kinds of comments on the chair and vice chair election process. Mary, are we starting with you?
Hi, Mary Wichter, Sammamish, Washington. Thanks for all your great comments. You brought not only viable, but added vitality to everything. And it's really great how you all looked at it differently, the words and how it was put together and the uses of it. I won't go over anything that I emailed because most of it was on format. And I thought it was very useful. And I think I've worked with this consultant before with Development Regs 3, and I know that every time we had a session and even between sessions, stuff would change a lot. So I'm sure he will integrate it as Ms. Carrie Bosworth had noted and proceed with it. I wanted to talk a little bit about, we talked mostly about the vision and stuff, but in the packet, there were things on the comprehensive plan itself. So I wanted to refer to that. In the comprehensive plan, there are some maps in the existing current comprehensive plan. And a couple of those maps, they have errors, like they're supposed to show where the water districts lie and it didn't come out. But if you do a public records request, you can find the aquifer susceptibility and you can get it, but it's not actually in the comp plan correctly. They mapped steep slopes, wetlands, and parks, but they didn't put a legend on it. So it took me about 3 or 4 years to get the legend added so you could actually see where the gray steep slopes occur in the land. And that was also difficult because the consultant who had done that map was listed, but it didn't say the person, and it didn't say what the date was or the source of it. So maps are super important. They show you where you are, existing conditions, and where you can go. But it's really important to make sure that the date is there, the source is there, why it was created, whatever background that you need. And then also a version of those maps, not only what's in the comprehensive plan, but what would be available, that it's a PDF that could be zoomable, because a lot of times you just can't read it in the font on the pages. But if you have the individual PDF, it's very good. And usually the person who makes the map has to create that map anyway to put it in. So I'm a big maps person. It tells you a lot about where you are, where you're going, and what could be. And I'm a very visual learner as well. Also, the King County so the Growth Management Act originally said critical areas had to be identified and protected starting 1990, which was a long time ago. And the city of Sammamish incorporated in 1999, and they adopted the King County 1998 code. So there are some things that King County had, particularly for surface water, that like they called it the King County Map Folio. So I had gotten that, given it to the city a long time ago, and it's going to be time to bring it up. And so each of those pages has a thing on it, like landslides, steep slopes, wetlands, and some of the other areas that are super important. So I'll be bringing that information back up. I understand there is a link that anybody that you guys can log on with the city, you can get to it directly. It's a little bit big to download just in size for a regular person, but I was able to get that. So you're going to see some of those things come up, because in one of the elements for the comp plan, it talks about landslides. And that should not only reflect where we came from in 1998, but what we know now. And then King County with the Oso landslide updated it quite a bit. So they have like potential steep slopes and things like that. So I think maps are very important and they really need to be used. And I just think that we had errors in the 2015 comp plan. It took forever to fix. So since we can't fix errors, let's do it right the first time. So there's a thing on SEPA being amended. I just learned that SEPA is the State Environmental Policy Act. And if you're doing something like a big thing, you have to say how you're going to change light and water and air and all the things. And like for the TDRs, I actually had to write that 20-page SEPA, and it was pretty detailed. What I've learned is that SEPA, in order to make things easier to build, I think we're going away from SEPA applying to projects. Like, I don't know, I heard that if you have a 12 unit or a 16 lot thing, the city can just put the determination of non-significance in the same period as the subdivision, and it isn't really looked at. So when I learned that recently, I was pretty terrified, couldn't actually sleep. So I think it's really important, if we really want to be able to have the city that we have and be able to protect the environment. And if SEPA isn't really going to be used for like medium, like, can you imagine a 20 plot house subdivision that you don't have to even do the SEPA for? We really need to make sure that we know what we're saying in the comprehensive plan. We need to make sure that the existing goals and policies that we have, or new ones that we'd create, modify, add, or delete, that they go forward to code that will be developed. And I thank David Pyle for declaring tonight that we not only have to adopt the comp plan, but you have to have the development regulations to implement those goals and policies ready to go. So again, what you're doing in this next 2 years is probably the most important stuff I've seen done in the city in over a decade, and it's going to last for 20 years. So have other people call in, get as many people involved as you can, because I think it's super important. There are also some things I think from the stormwater comprehensive plan or from the King County manual that could be added to the comp plan to help out. Most of it in the checklist that they had from prior meetings from PSRC and from the Department of Commerce, I think cover a lot of things, and the staff had written up what things were unclear, what things didn't match. And I think those were really important comments, and we'll have to hash through that when there's more known. I'm really glad to see the word jobs. We've talked about growth so much that there used to be like 4,200 units that were supposed to be built in town center, and there was supposed to be, I think it was 2,088 jobs or something or other, and nobody's talked about that. But if we grow and we don't have places for the people that need to work here and support, or if we don't have the jobs so that people can do things, we won't have the business economic vitality that we need, and we won't survive because we'll be taxing everybody to death for their residential homes. So there's quite a few things. The other thing on maps is that we were talking about having the future land use map, which in Montana, they call it the flume because flum just doesn't sound fun. And I think that our city in doing it can really benefit from that. So we don't have two maps the same. We have two maps that are different. And the final thing is there are things we can do in development regulations to make things easier to build and more affordable to build. I've sent articles in on that in the past. And some of them would be like, do you always have to have the front door facing the street? Do you always have to have a nice, pretty front yard that isn't really used by anyone? Does anyone actually use their side yards? So that's all the stuff we're working on now can tie into the development regulations. And I am at my 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Do we have on the Teams or on the Zoom meeting?
Yes, we have one hand raised. Mr. Stickney, I'm going to promote you to panelist.
Hello, planning commissioners. Real good meeting this evening. Consultants did a good job presenting the information. Overall, I feel there's a lot of good in the packet on the vision, comp plan, checklist. I've sent in a couple comments. I'll speak to one of them this evening, but in general, I think it's a very good approach and a plan overall. The comments all of you talked about this evening, I felt that there was a lot of thought to put into them. They all had relevance and just will be good additions to the process. There is no doubt. On the vision, you'll see in the handout I turned in, written public comment, I guess I should say, you'll see that I suggested adding one word down near the bottom of the vision, stay. We need to find a way so that the people that want to stay in Sammamish can. Because over the years, there hasn't been a lot of housing supply when people's needs change to meet some of those needs. So that's one thing there on the vision. On the comp plan, I will talk about what I consider to be an underarching thing, and I've talked about it before, but now's the time to kind of restate it. There's a tremendous amount of effort because it's mandated from the state providing numbers to counties and counties disaggregating, and I'm not sure I have the right word, share of regional affordable housing under 80% AMI, and some pretty strong mandates to plan for it at a pretty deep level, accountability, etc. Those numbers to me, anecdotally speaking, seem to get about 80% of the action in the housing needs analysis and what's going on. And they're not important, they are. But what's of far larger magnitude is what my comment is about, is internal needs that have not been quantified in Sammamish. In the first comp plan, the city did quantify the housing supply versus economic incomes for people making 100% AMI or less, but no economic segment over 100% AMI has been quantified since 2003, nor have specific demographic needs or workforce housing been quantified. And as I've mentioned before, but I think it's really important, our makeup of our community from an income perspective is roughly 1/7 of our households, about 3,500, have incomes at 80% average median income or less, and 6/7 over 19,000 have AMI incomes over 80%, and well up to over 500%, as I talk about it in the information I sent. We need to know to what degree housing supplies match up with those incomes and the demographics and the workforce in our community. And the numbers that matter far greater to our community long-term is allowing the cycle of life joy to occur. If you think about it, Sammamish, if you think about what it was in 1999 and what it is today, the park system expanded from 40 to over 600 acres, tons of civic activities, human services vastly improved, City Hall, library, MOU, Central Washington University, the Boys and Girls Club, trails, open space, parks. There's a lot of people that I talk to that want to stay here. And the issue is that in general, the supply side is the problem for the over 100% AMI. It's not the ability to pay. And that's what we need to learn. And so to my comment, which I sort of reiterate a little bit like a broken record in my comment in response to where it should be placed within the work plan, I'm responding to what's there. We do not know, nor have we planned for, internal needs within the community, and those numbers are far larger than the county numbers. As I always say, I'm not saying they all need to be met, but they all need to be known. And the consequences on virtually every aspect that makes up the community, take a look at part of PDFH that I sent today. All those consequence topics are, I don't know the right word for it, but not radically, significantly. If we stay, excuse me, let me take a step back and start over. If we stayed with the planning and land use that's in our current comprehensive plan, it would turn all those 40 topics one way. If we lowered housing across the board, which some in the community would like to see and has been aim over the last few years, it would turn all those topics another way. But if we optimize supply, increase types of housing for our own internal needs, that's why they're so important, and decrease other types, which actually have happened significantly over the last couple of years with building rigs 1 and 2, all those topics turn another way. Hence leads to my final comment. I suggested that a fourth strategy be put under the livable, natural, and built environment, which was establish optimal housing supply numbers based on cycle of life needs. This is a tangible numbers with targets assigned for 20 years as to what we want for all our income categories, demographic, and workforce. And don't forget, housing infrastructure is the single biggest asset in value that a community has. It's time to allow this to alleviate imbalance, add assets with appropriate benefits. Appreciate the chance to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Stickney, and we have no more hands raised.
All right. Thank you. Evan, Kelly, anything else from staff this evening?
Nothing further from us.
All right. I think we can move to adjourn.
Make a motion to move.
Second.
It's been moved and second that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.